Hey everybody, we're back with another draft here on the Lucky Paper YouTube channel. If you like us playing Paper Cube, like and subscribe. Support independent Magic content. No sponsors here. We can't be bought. Anyway, today we are drafting the Neoclassical cube. I've made a bunch of changes to this cube. Basically, really over-supported this black-white Knights deck with a lot more modern cards and modern Knights. Say, don't cry, it's fine, you're staying here. I've also added some explicit burn hate in the form of stuff like chill, which is rude, and warmth, which is double rude. So the burn deck hopefully gets a little more reined in by that. We are going to be drafting with 10 people today. The cube can support up to 10, so I figured why not? Fill out the pod with a bunch of friends. The more the merrier. I want to open Fast Bond. I've been really enjoying Fast Bond decks lately. I just want to open Fast Bond and then take a bunch of card draw, a bunch of bounce lands, and just go dummy. We've got our full 10 here, so we are going to fire. Let's do the thing. All right, no Fast Bond. Rip. But we did get Demonic Tutor, so when we get our Fast Bond later in the pack, we can definitely just go find a Demonic Tutor. I don't think this is close. Demonic Tutor is probably one of the best cards in the cube, and I really like that it enables me to do some rude, combo-oriented stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that Demonic Tutor. Next best card in the pack, I don't know. It's kind of a steep drop-off. I think a Chroma is one of the better creatures. You can morph it and then flicker it somehow to get it back and untap without having to pay that full morph cost. Astro Slide is definitely a build-around. There's a whole deck there, but I don't usually want to first pick it unless I'm in a pretty rough pack. I'll get that later on after I've got some cycling enablers. Verdant Force is a fine payoff. Fel Spectre is part of a combo deck, but we're just going to take this Demonic Tutor. That is not hard. Now, there's an Opposition. Opposition is definitely good enough to take, and we already have 2 copies of it in combination with Demonic Tutor, so I think I like that. Otherwise, I would take a Wooded Foothills here, probably. Yeah, probably Wooded Foothills. I think is the next best pick. Call the Herd is also fine, but we're just going to take Opposition. Opposition is kind of messed up, so now we are looking to get some creatures. We could either be a blue-black deck playing a lot of the Black Knights with Opposition kind of on the splash. Admittedly, splashing a double blue card is kind of rough, but that's one option. Or we could splash the Demonic Tutor in an Opposition deck, which tends to be best in blue-green, where you get a lot of creatures, or even white-blue, honestly. Here, City of Brass and Ash Barrens are both really safe. Exhume is the highest ceiling card. We do have a Demonic Tutor. We could even make that work with stuff like Opposition if we, exhume a Deranged Hermit or something. Arc Lightning is really good removal. Rancor is good in an aggressive green deck. If we play a lot of cheap creatures to feel our opposition, then Rancor should be good. But these are all kind of off strategy a little bit. I think Exhume is my pick here, and we may end up ignoring this opposition and just being a Reanimator deck if we get the right pieces, so we'll see. Now we have a chance to take some good fixing. So Growth Chamber is going to be great if we end up playing green, and even honestly fine if we don't. Tundra is also fine if we end up playing white. Sanctuary also, Sanctuary is actually too far off. I'm not going to do Sanctuary stuff. I like playing in a Chroma's Vengeance even in a creature deck because you can just cycle it if you don't need it. I think we just take the Growth Chamber here. And this also leaves us open to still finding a Fast Bond. Admittedly, Opposition, Exhume are not really part of the Fast Bond deck historically, but you never know. Now, Opt is easy and safe. Gravedigger is also, pretty good. It's good value. Nothing crazy. These cards are double white, so we're pretty far from playing those. We could just take an Ash Barrens. So it's basically Ash Barrens, Opt, or Gravedigger, huh? If we end up splashing the opposition, I don't want to be playing things like Opt because you don't want your cantrips to be hard to cast in the early game. You want those to be really easy to cast. So I think Gravedigger is very safe, as is Ash Barrens. So far we don't have that much fixing, so I think we'll take an Ash Barrens here. Gravedigger's not a huge payoff. Now we have another Ash Barrens or a Gemstone Mine or some other blue cards. Blue does seem kind of open, it's worth noting. Still Moon Cavalier is in here for the Knights deck, which we can basically just treat it as a double black card at this point and ignore the hybrid mana. Powder Keg is good at sometimes cleaning up a mess left behind by some other creatures. Sylvos is a good reanimator target, but not the best reanimator target, given that you have to pay the green to regenerate it. If you are not in a green deck, it can be kind of rough. I'm just going to play it safe and take another Ash Barrens here. I mean, Arcanus is also fine, but triple blue. We only have one other blue card so far. All right, now we just take a fetch land. Icy Manipulator is good. Peak is fine, Shock is fine, but we just want to fetch land here. Granted, we have nothing to get with it yet, but there's a whole rest of a draft for that to come together. Then we have Silent Spectre. Wirewood Guardian bins itself. Wild Mongrel, also really good in the Reanimator deck, just as a discard outlet. I don't mind playing a fair Silent Spectre. You just, play it for 3, a couple turns later, you unmorph it. It can be fine. Mind Slicer's not really what our deck is doing. We gotta take some more non-land cards, I think. So I'm gonna go ahead and take... Let's take his Wild Mongrel. I think this is honestly the best signal we've gotten so far. Okay, so Living Death. Now we got a deck. I love having a copy of Demonic Tutor and Living Death. Now, we already passed a bunch of cycling creatures. Hopefully we get more of them. Stuff like Timberland Ancient, stuff like that Wirewood thing we just passed. Those are all great, but Living Death is a whole deck, so we're going to take that. Now, none of these play in the Living Death deck, but Knight of Dusk Shadow is just a fine card. Barrenmore, also just a fine card. Sapperling Burst, not really a thing here. I mean, it's fine, but we don't have any of the synergies. Basically, you want a way to give the Sapperlings haste, ideally, with Sapperling Burst, or you want a way to get the enchantment back, like an Auramancer or something. We're not in the Auramancer colors. I think we just take this Knight as a good stuff card. That's my concern with this extra support I've added for the Black-White Knights deck, is that if the new modern Knights are just too good at a baseline, then they'll just get snapped up by any deck, and then they won't actually be there to fuel the Knights deck when the time comes, so that's maybe a concern, something to keep an eye on. Back to the pack we opened, and this is an easy peasy Dimir Aqueduct. Love me a bounce land here. We're taking that, no question. It's a Lake Caldoran Outpost for whoever gets that. We're probably not playing any of these. Maybe we end up heavier blue and we can play Sorceress Sight. I don't see us splashing red. I mean, I'll take a typed red land because some things have Mountain Cycling, which I want to automatically put in the graveyard for Living Death, but I think we'll just take a Sorceress Sight and probably not play it. Probably. So interestingly, these decks, you sometimes don't want a lot of removal because, sure, Weatherseed, Treefolk. I mean, yeah, we're going to take Weatherseed, Treefolk, I guess. We're not excited about that, but it's fine. We can bin it and then bring it back with Living Death. That at least cycles, but we're not going to play it. I'm not going to play that either. Okay. What I was going to say is that you oftentimes don't actually want that much removal in the Living Death deck because you don't want to be removing your opponent's creatures or even trading with them before you cast a Living Death. You kind of want to bait them into a big board wipe after you've discarded a bunch of creatures or cycled through your deck. Having Demonic Tutor makes that actually possible, which is why I include tutors in this cube, so I can do stuff like that, like build a whole strategy around specifically Living Death. So that's a potential thing we could do. It is a little bit committal, so, things to be aware of. Singular Autocrat is probably the best card in this cube in black to pair with opposition. 4 bodies for 1 card at 4 mana is a really good rate. We also have a premium fetch land here. We also have Diabolic Intent, which can be another tutor to find a Living Death. Pretty sick to sacrifice a creature to Diabolic Intent. Go find your Living Death, bring that creature back. Earthcraft is also a bit of a standout card, but I hope we're going to have a lot of non-basics because we're going to be a 3-color deck, so I don't think it's going to be trivial to have something to turn the Earthcraft on. And then obviously Brainstorm and Preordain are just good cards, but I still think we're going to be kind of splashing blue a little bit. Frantic Search also really good in the Living Death deck. You can even Frantic Search and on the same turn follow up with Living Death because you get to untap all your lands. So a lot of good cards here. I think, honestly, the most likely of all of them to wheel is the Singular Autocrat. I think Diabolic Intent and Frantic Search are maybe, and in the Fixing Land, are probably the best things for me. I want my deck to really consistently do the Living Death thing, so I'm going to take Diabolic Intent. We'll see if that ends up being right later on. Now we have a Golgari Rot Farm, an Exalted Angel. This is kind of cool in Living Death decks and, other Reanimator decks, because obviously I'm not going to have white mana to flip this thing or cast it. But in a pinch, I can always just play it as a morph. Having a 3-mana 2/2 is not good, but it's better than a dead card. And then obviously if it dies, I can discard it and bring it back with Living Death. It's quite good. But I think we probably just have to take fixing here. This is our first actual black-green fixing land. I wish we were getting some more typed duels. I mean, we have a Taiga here, but I think we just got to take this Golgari Rot Farm just over this Waterfront Bouncer and this Exalted Angel, I think. Then we have the Fast Bond. Can we do it? I don't know if we can actually do it. I got 2 green sources plus 2 Ash Barrens right now. I do have 3 bounce lands, which is what I want to be doing with Fast Bond. What are we giving up? I mean, Animate Dead's really good for our deck. Bone Shredder's pretty good for our deck, though again, we don't want to be killing creatures that much before we cast Living Death. I would also be pretty highly taking a Phyrexian Furnace or Withered Wretch here as a little bit of grave hate so I could tidy up things. I'm going to take the Fast Bond. I'm here for a fun time, not for a long time. So let's take the Fast Bond and see if we can make this happen. Now, what we want, now that we have Fast Bond, is card draw, ways to play off... Oh my goodness, this pack. Ways to play off the top of our deck, and bounce lands, I think, are the key. We don't have any card draw right now. Excuse me. We don't have any ways to play off the top of our deck, but we do have bounce lands, so it's something. Here we've got Entomb and Survival of the Fittest. Survival of the Fittest is definitely the higher ceiling card. So I think we just take Survival here. You play Survival on 2, you just put all your best creatures in your graveyard before a Living Death on 5. You can even go find cycling creatures if I end up finding them in the packs to make sure you hit your land drops, which can be nice. For example, like this Twisted Abomination. I think Twisted Abomination is going to just edge out this Rakdos Carnarium. Red is off color, but it's still a dual land, or a bounce land rather, for Fast Bomb, which is really good, but we're just going to take Abomination here. Swamp Cycle that, get it back with Living Death, you're very happy. Speaking of cycling and get it back with Living Death, we have Scion of Darkness. Fauna Shaman and Wood Elves are also really good pickups here. Spiritmonger will be fine. I think we just take the Scion. Scion's really high value to get into play. Fauna Shaman is good as redundancy for Survival of the Fittest, but it is slow. And what I don't like about it here is that we actually don't have that many... where I really like Fauna Shaman alongside Survival, having that redundancy, is in decks that have a lot of Madness creatures, where you want the discard outlet. You're discarding your Arrogant Worms, your Root Wallas, etc. We're not doing that. We're discarding stuff for later value. So I think I'm taking Scion here. Buried Alive. Oy, oy, oy. We're getting fed a little bit. I would also happily play a Worldly Tutor, I think, but I think it's going to have to be Buried Alive. And now I'm looking for some... We're getting closer and closer to a full-on combo deck, and I want some more big creatures to put into play. Withered Wretch is the card I mentioned earlier, which can help me keep my opponent's graveyard clear for a Living Death. So the question is, does that beat Necromancy? I think it does, because we're actually a little light on creatures right now. If I split this into 2 rows, we can see that, yeah, we only have 5 creatures at the moment. Now, that's okay for Living Death, because we have Buried Alive, Survival of the Fittest, to bin a bunch of creatures, even if we only draw a couple of them. But we do want to have creatures to discard to Survival of the Fittest, and we also just want to have stuff to do in the early game. So I think I'm going to take this Withered Wretch over the Necromancy. Now, we have Llanowar Elves, Wall of Roots, Necrogoyf as entirely reasonable options. Now, Necrogoyf is actually kind of a nombo here. Makes each player discard a card. Game 1, maybe I can get them, but later on, once my opponents know I have a Living Death, then it's going to... they're just going to feed stuff into it. So I think we're just going to take this Llanowar Elves here. It's a really cheap creature, which is nice. A little bit of ramp, which is nice. Another green source for Survival, which is nice. Wall of Roots actually even better in that regard, because I can activate Survival on both turns, my turn and my opponent's turn. It also buys me time until I get my combo off. You know what? I lied. I taught myself into Wall of Roots. We're doing Wall of Roots. Natural Order. Ooh, okay. We've got... Everything's coming together. This is really nice. Now I kind of wish I had taken the Elf. They actually both curve into Natural Order the same way, but now we're looking for some big green creatures to pay off. We got the Autocrat back. I called that. I feel good about that. The question is, do we take that over Frantic Search? I think we do. Our fixing is not fantastic. We honestly might end up not playing this opposition, which feels bad to say. Autocrat's fine either way, so we're going to take Autocrat. We take the Ash Barrens here for another piece of fixing, though in 3-color decks, Ash Barrens doesn't fix as well as in other as in like 1 or 2 color decks. Well, 1 color deck, obviously you don't need any fixing. Wireweed Symbiote, very happy to have that. Do I have any elves to bounce right now? I don't right now. But that's just a good green creature to sacrifice to our natural order. Smallpox, also kind of a nombo with our Living Death. I don't want people to be putting their own stuff in the graveyard before I cast Living Death. I think his deck's coming together. I think we're doing okay. The Fast Bond was admittedly a little greedy, because right now we don't have a great way to capitalize on it. But we're waiting for one last person to make a pick, it looks like. Random player here. It's their last pick, though. So what are we... There we go. Okay. Whew. Boy, oh boy. So, what I want more than anything is big green dummies. I want Verdant Force. We already passed up on Sylvos. I want Verdant Force or Symbiotic Worm. Verdant Force, ideally, I think, is the ideal one. I'd also take a Phantom Neshoba. I wouldn't kick a Phantom Neshoba out of bed. Now... Sorry, allergies. We have, for curve consideration, we could take a Quirion Ranger. This also is a bit of a combo with Fast Bond. You can bounce a forest and then just replay it again, so it's essentially pay 1 life to untap target creature. Also, you can use it to get more mana. Like if you... It also just produces additional mana, essentially, because you can bounce a tap land, play it untapped. So that is kind of interesting. That, I think, might come around. Lotleth Troll is, I think, the power outlier here and the best card for our deck. It's another free discard outlet to pair with the Wild Mongrel. We don't actually have as many things to pitch right now as I would like, but we don't really have one of those to take in this pack. Morphlings, while it's a good creature, it's not that good to reanimate because you need blue to make it good. And we will have some blue, but not that much blue. All right, Bayou. Easy Bayou. We need our mana fixing. None of these other cards are even in contention. I mean, a Chroma, I would definitely play a Chroma, but I'm not taking it over the perfect fixing land for my deck. Even though I only have 1 fetch, it's still going to be really good, so I'm taking that. Now, here's a big dumb green guy that cycles, so I think we're on the aberration here. Arguably, we could take Mystical Tutor as yet another copy of Living Death and Natural Order and Buried Alive. If we play an island, we have 1, 2, 3 Ash Barrens plus a Dimir Aqueduct and a Simic Growth Chamber. That's 5 green sources. I think Aberration could come back. I don't think people are going to take Aberration. We're going to take this. Famous last words. I like Hypnotic Spectre. I also like Elvish Pioneer. I also like Pernicious Deed. So Elvish Pioneer is like a one-shot fast bond. You get to play 1 extra land, which is still very good with the dual lands, right? You can, on turn 1, play Forest, Elvish Pioneer, drop a bounce land, pick up the Forest, and you untap, play another land, you got 3 mana. It's pretty good. That's also pretty likely to wheel. I think Spectre is definitely not going to come back. It's another creature which we do need. It's really good after a Living Death. After a Living Death specifically. Not before a Living Death, but after a Living Death. Pernicious Deed just clean up so much, though. This is where the Pernicious Deed, Living Death tension comes in. You don't really want to pop your Deed before you cast a Living Death. You want your Living Death to be the thing that cleans up the board. I'm going to take another creature. I think I need more creatures in this deck. Spectre it is. All right. Got Visara the Dreadful as a really good reanimator target. We have Krosan Tusker as a very medium reanimator target. It does have the benefit of being green. Right now, we actually are not playing this natural order if we don't get another couple good green creatures. The addition of Krosan Tusker, I mean, are we sacrificing like a Symbiote or a Wall of Roots or a Wild Mongrel and paying 4 mana and a card to get a 6/5? It's probably not that good. Visara, however, is extremely good. This also helps clean up after a Living Death. If I do have to put some of their creatures back into play, Visara can help deal with them afterwards. Life Death is a really spicy inclusion. Carrion Feeder, Dread Return. Dread Return is actually kind of sick. Interesting. Interesting. How many cards? We have 8 lands right now. Across 30 cards, so we're at 22 playables, so we're not quite at playables. I think we got to take the Living Death, and we also have, we don't always have to, we have to take the Life Death. We are trying to do the Living Death thing most games, but in a game where we can't, we can just discard a creature and just do a fair reanimation sort of thing. And also, sometimes you cast Life, and it's good. You never know. All right, Birchfloor Rangers is a cheap creature. Lotus Petal helps us do our unfair thing faster. Treetop Village, I think, is just really powerful. Unburden has cycling, and Spinning Darkness is a relatively new addition that does require you to have enough black cards in your graveyard to exile. I think it's mostly a mono black card. In terms of removal, we have just Visara and Living Death right now, which was somewhat intentional. We leaned into the removal in the form of Living Death. Against counterspells, we could struggle. Burstlow Rangers is good for the curve, but also we don't have any other elves, so we're not going to do that. We're also probably not getting there on natural order right now, which is a real shame. Which means we maybe don't even play Weatherseed Treefolk compared to these other. I mean, it's actually a bit comparable to Twisted Abomination in terms of its value in play. Maybe we do play Weatherseed Treefolk. And then our mana fixing is medium. Solidly medium. I think we just take the land. Tortured Existence. It's another discard outlet, but it's not one that works with Living Death. We don't want to be returning creatures to our hand. I actually think maybe I just take Mana War here. This is interaction that is fine against Living Death. They're not putting their thing in the graveyard, so we can just bounce their thing. Also really good if you do have to get some of their things back with Living Death, you just bounce it back with Mana War. I mean, not really good. It's fine. It takes them off tempo. Night of Infamy is also totally fine, but I think I'm kind of full up on 2s, and I'd like another 3. Grizzly Fade is also fine here, but rather do this. All right, we got Basking Root Wallow, which I think is at the pick. Decree of Pain is also really good. Exploration is like redundancy for Fast Bond, but I don't think good enough here. Life Death costs 2 realistically because we are casting the death side of that more often. How many discard outlets do we actually have right now? Because we have other ways to get things in the graveyard, like Buried Alive. Discard outlets, we have Survival of the Fittest. We have Lot Troll, Wild Mongrel. And that's it. So we're actually not discarding that many cards. I'm taking Decree of Pain. That goes in the 5-mana slot. Watery Grave. I like that. That makes our Bloodstained Mire get blue. That's going to help us play those cards, which is nice. Werebear is also totally fine, but yeah. Now here we have Unburial Rites, Quirion Ranger, get come back around, Heart Warden, and Deathmark for the sideboard. Really good out of the sideboard, but definitely a sideboard card. 1, 2, so let's see. How many blue sources do we have now? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 if we play an island, which we don't really want to play an island, but that gives us 5 more blue sources, so we kind of have to. What are we at? 34 minus 10. This is 24 cards. So we're basically at playables, but there's some things here that are kind of questionable. Like, I don't love the Treefolk. I mean, the rest of it is actually kind of solid. So what do we want most? Like, I guess maybe we can afford to take a sideboard card here and just take a Deathmark. We're going to do it. Our main deck is pretty full up. Yeah, Regrowth, we like that. You know what's better than Living Death? 2 Living Deaths. Wall of Blossoms, even better pickup. Put that Regrowth in the sideboard now. Plow Under. We'll side Plow Under in against a slow opponent. Squee is actually not out of the question to play, because it's really good with Survival of the Fittest, Lot with Troll, and Wild Mongrel. I don't think that's enough discard outlets for me to be excited to play it, but it's not out of the question, which is interesting. Plow Under, sideboard card against an aggressive opponent. I'm sorry, a controlling opponent. That's really slow. So that puts us at 36 minus 10, so it's 26 cards. We need some cuts. Are we going to play this island in order for this Mystical Tutor to be castable? Right now we have Demonic Tutor to find Living Death, and that's it. In terms of generic cycling cards, we only have the Scion. So there's a certain type of Living Death deck that if we had got Living Death maybe a little earlier and the draft had gone a little differently, we could have been like almost a 5-color cycling Living Death deck where you play all of the big creatures with land cycling across all of the colors. And in those kinds of decks, you can kind of rely on finding your Living Death. It kind of plays almost like the constructed Living End deck in Modern, where you can kind of rely on finding your Living End, or in the case of Modern, your Cascade cards, just by cycling enough that you can get there. That's not what this deck is. The only cycling creature we have is Twisted Abomination and Sign of Darkness, and Twisted A-Bomb just finds a land. It doesn't actually find the next card in your deck. So I think Squeeze a little bit too cute. Squeeze got to go. Too cute. That's down to 25 cards now. I want to play 16 lands in this deck with these 3 bounce lands, which I think is fine. Which means I need one more cut. Exhume is... It's cute that Exhume is also symmetrical along with the Living Death. 1 second. If we're not playing opposition, okay, hold up. Here's another question. Are we playing opposition if we play an island? That gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 blue sources. I'm wondering if we're supposed to play this opposition here. If we play opposition, we cut stuff like probably Exhume. Ironically, we probably cut the Mystical Tutor for playing opposition, just because we still need creatures. Maybe we cut the Creative Pain if we're playing opposition. I'm not going to do it at first. I feel like it's a little too much. I think 8 sources is fine for our Mystical Tutor and our Mana War. Remember, Mystical Tutor, we're almost always getting Living Death. Sometimes we'll get a Buried Alive, or I guess theoretically, you know, an Exhume or Life Death maybe. Or the Decree of Pain. We're getting something we're going to cast late with the Mystical Tutor, so it's okay if we hit our blue source later on for that reason. So that puts us still at like 1 cut. Symbiote we're just playing because it's a cheap creature, which maybe we don't need. Just a cheap white creature or a cheap green creature doesn't do anything else. Right, because there's no other elves in this whole deck. Or no elves, period, in this whole deck. So I think we're just going to cut the Symbiote. Curve is a little clunky. We're really heavy on 2. But this is basically a combo deck. What we're trying to do is get a big Living Death off, milling a bunch of creatures into the graveyard. We have Withered Wretch to clear stuff from our opponent's graveyard. We have tutors, multiple tutors, and Demonic Tutor and Diabolic Intent to find our Living Death, and Mystical Tutor. So we're going to find the Living Death very reliably, which is good. I'm wondering how things are going to go against players with counterspells. And we're going to have some really fun... I mean, Fast Bond is not good here. It has to be said. It's just not. We have no card draw. Yeah, hold on a sec. Ugh. I really wanted to play Fast Bond, but we're not drawing cards. These are great. Fast Bond's fantastic with wheels, Memory Jar, Wheel of Fortune, that kind of stuff, even Windfall. It's really good if you have just a bunch of repeated card draw, like if you have your Deep Analyses and Think Twices and Factor Fictions and Gush is a new addition that is really good with Fast Bond. If you don't have any of that stuff, it's pretty suspect. So I think we're going to cut that. It makes me feel bad, which means that we can either play 17 lands, which I think is a bit much given that we have 3 bounce lands here. We are going to be in the awkward situation of having to play our bounce lands. Like if our bounce land is our second land in hand, it's very unlikely we're going to be able to cast something on turn 1 because our only 1-drop is Mystical Tutor. So we're going to have to, bounce a thing there and then maybe discard to hand size, which is rough. Not rough enough to not make me want to play all of those bounce lands because they're still really good. We're going to stick with 16. Based on how it auto-suggested lands, how many black sources does that give us? 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 black sources is more than fine. Green sources is important because we want multiple greens in order to activate survival many times in a turn. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, our mana is good even with an island. So, question is, what do we bring in here? We have a couple options. We have Smallpox. We have Regrowth. We have Plow Under. We have Squee, Opposition, Wirewood, Symbiote. Not a natural order deck, unfortunately. What are we regrowthing here? Regrowthing a tutor is fine. Go find the next most important thing in your deck. We could... Are we actually going to cast multiple Living Deaths? The only situation where I see us wanting to cast multiple Living Deaths is if we have a Withered Wretch and we can eat all of our opponent's creatures out of the graveyard, like trade in combat with everything but the Withered Wretch, eat everything out of the graveyard, then regrow the... it's also just fine. Well, I only have 1 fetch land, so it's not going to be mana fixing. What else am I going to be rebuying here? Rebuy... If I have a Survival of the Fittest, I can rebuy like an Exhume or a Life Death. Maybe I just start on 17 lands. Because this is 33 minus 10. I think I'm going to start on 17 lands. It seems like a lot. but I'll know what is important to bring in. I'm definitely going to be sideboarding aggressively depending on what my opponent is doing, but I think that's what I'm going to do. I like the actual suggestions from the auto land here, which is very rare, but I'm going to go ahead and lock this deck in. That is what I'll be playing on stream. Take a little screen cap for myself. So yeah, that's the deck. Thanks for tuning in for the draft. We are going to have games going up on the YouTube channel later on this week. You're not going to see this video before the stream, so if you missed the stream, you missed it. If you don't want to miss future streams, you can subscribe to our Twitch channel over at twitch.tv/luckypapermtg. We stream every Monday evening Eastern time, more or less. Occasionally, the schedule is a little less consistent, but it's pretty much every Monday evening. And I'm hopeful for this deck. I can't wait to cast some big Living Deaths. That's going to be the plan. Hopefully, we're not up against another discard deck. That can make things a little iffy. But then we have Demonic Tutor and Diabolic Intent to go find our Withered Wretch. Withered Wretch, very important card. Anyway, that's it for this video. So, like, subscribe, etc. I'll see you in the next one.